Hello and welcome to another video here at Hobbies and Happiness. My name's Dan.
And I'm Jim. And today we're going over the differences between Marvel Legendary and Marvel Champions.
All right, so it's about time we do this video. We've been wanting to do this for a while. We've been talking about it for a while. So I remember when I first got into these games and heard about them, I'm like, okay, what? And like I knew nothing about what these games are. So we kind of wanted to give you guys a short video, kind of comparing and contrasting Marvel Legendary and Marvel Champions. So we're just gonna jump right in with the one that's been around longer. Marvel Legendary.
Yes.
All right, so Marvel Legendary was designed by Devin Lowe and released by Upper Deck in 2012. So Legendary's been around for about 10 years now. So been around for a while.
Wow, I can't believe you said that to me. Wow.
It's been around a long time, but they've got a lot of different expansions. So like this game is, I guess, both cooperative and competitive.
Yep.
Kind of depending on who you play with. Yeah.
I don't know if he's watching. Who knows?
Yeah, so like me personally, like the way that I've mostly generally played is cooperatively. And that's kind of how I like to play. But the thing I like about a lot of these deck building games, right? Because that's what Marvel Legendary is. It's 100% a deck building experience. The majority of them are really cooperative. This one can be played either, both ways. But, it's most, I think it's mostly cooperative.
Oh, yeah. 100%. I mean, like, if you guys aren't working together at least a little bit, the villains are going to get out of control and you're going to lose the game.
So if you're not familiar with what a deck building game is, most deck builders, right, you start with a typical starter deck, which in this game is 12 cards, I believe. And then you acquire stronger cards as you progress and build your deck over the course of the game. So it's very similar to just about every other deck building game on the market. They each have their different quirks and their different variations on how you start the game, how you build your deck over time. But I mean, this is like I don't want to say it's the quintessential deck builder, but it's very similar to just about every other deck building game on the market. Now, the one thing that, and there's other deck builders that are like this, right? But you have the card market, right? Typically, there's 5 cards that are out in front of all players, and they rotate as the game progresses, right? It rotates by either you acquiring them through card effects, right? You're purchasing them, or they get destroyed through other various card effects by negative effects.
Some of my favorite ones to do.
Oh, what? Destroy?
Just to be like, this card's been sitting here for a while and no one wants it. Be able to blow up the card and refill it.
Yeah.
So much better.
Yep. Now, players in this game are fighting against a mastermind and the mastermind's scheme, right? The scheme is basically the thing that the mastermind is trying to accomplish, right? Now, the villain or the mastermind, right? The mastermind has their own forces that they're using to try to destroy the players, right? And that's all included in what's called the villain deck. So a typical turn for Marvel Legendary is when you start, each player's turn is essentially the same thing, right? You flip over top card of the villain deck, and then the villains, essentially they move throughout the city, right? And then if you don't stop them, they escape. There's a negative card effect that happens. You play your turn, you acquire stronger cards, add them to your deck, and then there's 2 different resources. You've got your, it's basically your attacking points, your recruiting points, essentially, right? Attacking to destroy destroy villains and masterminds, and then your recruiting points for adding more powerful cards to your deck. At this point, I think there's approximately 30 different expansions to this game. So there's a lot. Most recently, they had a Black Panther expansion and also a Black Widow expansion. So with new sets added constantly, feels like. And so right now they also have other IPs. There's a Aliens Legendary expansion. There is a Buffy. There's a Buffy. There's a Firefly. There's a Firefly one. We said Aliens. There's also a Predator one. There's a James Bond. And the next one is Matrix. They're doing a
Ooh,
Matrix one.
that's sick.
I am excited for that one,
Yeah,
honestly.
I want to see that.
Yeah, that's going to be sick. That was announced at Gen Con this year, and they just recently talked about, released news about it coming. I'm not sure when it's coming. I'll have to check that. One of my favorite things about this game, though, is extremely modular. And, you know, a lot of these games are very modular. Like, you get to pick, you can either, like, pick the ones you want to play, or just do a randomizer, right?
Yeah, my favorite one is to just be able to, each one of us picks, right? So say we're playing with 4 people, we each pick a character that we just really like to play with.
Yeah.
And then the 5th one could be a random.
Yeah, there's so many different ways you can play the game. Now, before we move on to champions, Jim, what's one of your favorite things about Legendary, you'd say?
Ooh, wow. It's probably my favorite thing for deck builders in general is that the games are always different.
Yeah.
It's the fact that you can play the game 100 times, and nearly every single time it's going to be completely different game.
Yeah.
And you just never know it's going to be off the top. You could be like, oh, I've done this 80 times and we've never lost. Turns out that one game is going to make it to where you lost.
Yeah, and we're actually going to talk about this a little bit at the end of the video and kind of explore that a little bit between both of these games.
I didn't want to say theory crafting.
But like you kind of are though.
Yeah,
like you kind of are because like you're doing that on the fly.
I know.
You're solving
like
you're solving a puzzle on the fly kind of. Like trying to figure out how can you make your deck better.
Yeah.
And also help your teammates or hinder your opponents kind of however you're playing the game, right? Yeah. Marvel Legendary is still going strong. And I'm going to mention right here real quick, if you really like Legendary, you need to check out Bagel Top Games. He does a lot of, all he does is Marvel Champions content. Marvel Legendary content. Yeah. So definitely go check him out. I'll leave a link to his channel down in the description. He streams over on Twitch. I believe streams on YouTube as well. But definitely go check out his YouTube channel down below. All right, next one we'll start talking about is Marvel Champions. Now, Jim really likes Marvel Champions.
Yeah, I do.
And I'll get to that in 1 second. Now, Marvel Champions was designed by Michael Boggs, Nate French, and Caleb Grace, and was released by Final Fantasy Games in 2019. So,
Final Fantasy Games?
Did I say Final Fantasy? I did say Final Fantasy Games. Fantasy Flight Games. It's the same thing, right? We're leaving that in. So similar to Marvel Legendary in that it's 100% a cooperative experience. There's really, I don't think there's, unless you're like doing some house rules or something, I'm not sure how you can make this a competitive game. And we'll get into how in a second. But Jim, like, why have you been loving Marvel Champions? Like, what do you really enjoy about this game?
The variety of characters that there are, and on top of that, you kind of have like 4 ways of being able to build them, right? Yeah. You have all the different colors. You have the aggression, justice, defensive or protection, and then leadership. Yeah. But then inside of all those colors, you have a plethora of cards that you could be using to then be changing up your decks even further.
So Marvel Champions is classified as a living card game, or LCG, which has been trademarked, I believe, by
Final Fantasy Games.
By Final Fantasy Games, Fantasy Flight.
Fantasy Flight.
Or LCG, where new cards are continuously printed in these different sets, right? Now, like Jim mentioned, right, each player, you choose a hero, then you choose an aspect, which like Jim talked about, and then you build a deck of between 40 to 50 cards. Now, one thing that I don't know if I like or dislike it, I think I actually like it because it's not a set number. Like, it has to be 40 or 50. It's anywhere between 40 or 50. Yep. Because, like, you know, each hero has their different strengths and their different weaknesses, and some want a larger deck, some want a, you know, smaller deck, right? Smaller deck size. So, like, there's so many different ways of, and we talk about this word a lot, but versatility, right? So any way that you can be as versatile as possible, always a positive, right? Now, each hero has their own kit, right, of hero cards that must be included, which is typically like 15 cards.
Which is actually a really good thing to pay attention to, because if you have your hero cards that you really like and you want to see those as often as possible, playing a 40 card deck allows you to be able to see those cards. Or if there's a certain combo you're trying to get off as fast as possible, the fewer cards in your deck, the better.
Yeah. All right. So in Marvel Champions, players are fighting against a villain, and each villain has their own main scheme that they're trying to complete. Now, all of these cards get shuffled together in the villain decks. All those villain cards get shuffled together with other modular encounter sets that get shuffled together to form the encounter deck. Okay. Now, players can add other encounter sets to either increase the difficulty or to change up the game a little, right? So the only thing that the players are going against is that villain, but that encounter deck. Right. So again, Marvel Legendary, you have that villain deck, right? And then in Champions, you have the encounter deck. So each player is going against that one bad deck, right? For lack of a better word. So again, typical turn structure for this game is each player goes through their turn and plays out their cards. Okay. Then once those turns are over, it then goes on to the encounter phase. Each player takes bad cards, right? Yeah. And then there's also the villain phase where the villain attacks or schemes depending upon what form each player is in. Because the nice thing about cool, I think it's cool because it's the flavor, right? The alter ego or hero form. There's two different sides that players can be on. You can be in hero form or you can be in your alter ego form. If you're in alter ego form, the villain can't attack you, right? Because you're not the hero. You're Peter Parker, right? You're just you're a high school student or college student, whatever, right? So again, my thing about this game is the flavor. Like the flavor, there's no lack of flavor ever, and they've hit the nail on the head so very well. If
there's no hero to stop him, he's gonna go off and scheme.
Yep. So after that, play returns to the players. So that's your typical turn structure in this game. So like Legendary, Marvel Champions is extremely modular because again, you're building your decks. You can change up your deck however you want, but you have your deck pre-built before the game. Okay, you're not building your deck during the game. There are elements of deck building, but it's just it takes place before the game even starts. Okay?
Deck construction before the game. And then you get into it.
I'm not sure when I wrote this, okay, but to date, I think I counted, and there's 24 hero packs, 4 scenario packs, 5 campaign boxes, including the original core set that have been released so far. Right now, we're going through X-Men. There's a lot of cards, dude. There's a lot. So right now we're going through X-Men. Interested to see what's coming next after X-Men. But this game has been very, very popular since it really came out. We've kind of touched on what each game is, right? And now we kind of want to touch on kind of the differences and kind of compare and contrast them a little bit. Before I forget. But we mentioned, Jim was talking about his favorite thing about deck builders in general, and it was like the variety, right? Of how each game is so different from every other one. Because they're never, even if you play with the same cards, right? Your deck is not going to be the same. Your deck is going to be different, right? So that leads to different experiences when you play the game. I don't have that with Champions. Like, I'm gonna play the deck that I know how to build, or even build. If I have the same deck, right? Even the villain, right? Even when I'm playing the villain in those encounter modular sets, it's going to be a very similar experience, right? I'm just gonna say it is what it is. Like, it's not necessarily a bad thing, not necessarily a good thing, because it's really kind of your perspective and what you're looking for in the game. But I've never found in any deck builder. There's never been 2 games that are the same. Never been 2 games that are the same.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty much impossible for them to be the exact same. Pretty much impossible.
Yeah, and you just don't get that with Marvel Champions. You really don't, because again, you're constructing your deck beforehand, and then with Champions, it's more like you're trying to solve a puzzle.
Yeah,
like each villain is its own puzzle, and then once you've solved it, you're like, okay, that's cool, that was fun.
But you could also try to solve it through a different route.
Yes, you could. Absolutely. It's really just dependent upon what you're looking for in the game.
Or you just do solo player Black Widow and then like never have to worry about the scheme.
Yeah,
and it's just like you slowly kill them.
Yeah. So deck building is a part of both games, but how you build your deck is just very different, right? Deck construction is more involved in Champions, right? Because you're building your deck, you're constructing your deck before the game even takes place, and then you're trying to go and basically solve your puzzle. Now, we classify both these games as card games. Depending on who you are, right, there are people who classify Legendary as a board game.
They're wrong.
Yeah. or more a board game feel, right? Less setup, quicker to get to playing the game, right? Because again, in order to get to sit down and play a game of Champions, you have to construct your deck beforehand.
Yeah.
So it's quicker to get Marvel Legendary to the table than it is to get Champions to the table. Marvel Legendary has more of that board game feel, I think, because of that. Again, depending on like how you're defining it, right? Now, the thing with Legendary, you don't need any experience to sit down and enjoy the game and play and get to playing. I don't think that's the case with Champions.
No, not at all. That is definitely for some experienced card game players.
Right, because again, because I feel like if you don't have experience, you'll sit down, you'll play the pre-con, and then you won't go beyond that. Because if you don't have that experience playing card games, deck construction can feel daunting.
Yeah.
100% can feel daunting.
Which is why it is definitely a good thing to net deck.
Yes,
if
absolutely.
you're new, it doesn't mean you can't play this. Just look up a deck.
Yeah.
If you're done with playing the pre-con list, you're like, certain cards in here are just terrible. You don't like any of them. Just start looking up deck list.
Yeah. So that's definitely a great resource to have for Champions. So I think like what I would recommend, like my personal recommendation, if you don't have a lot of experience playing many card games, is if you were to choose between Marvel Legendary and Marvel Champions, the first question would be, well, what kind of experience are you looking for? But to be honest, I may not even ask that because again, if I know there's that lack of experience there, I would probably steer you more towards Legendary and go for that first before jumping into Champions. Because with Legendary, that gets you that experience of deck building. You're learning that process. And again, while deck construction in Champions is different from that deck building experience you're getting in Legendary, I think that experience you're getting in games like Marvel Legendary helps inform you and teaches you some basics for games like Marvel Champions. They're still very different games because again, like how you build your deck in games like Marvel Legendary is very different than how you construct your deck in Champions, because there's costs you have to pay attention to. Learning about those synergies and like how cards function together. I think those skills you acquire and learn those skills in games like Marvel Legendary.
Especially if the person is new. One thing I also like, if they're playing Marvel Legendary, right, and say one of their favorite characters is Hulk. Right? You just try to buy up all the Hulk cards you can inside the market or in the lineup, and your deck just like works by itself because all the Hulk cards like work together, but they're also just very strong individual cards. But if you want to play with Wolverine, you want to play with Deadpool, you want to play with the Shield characters in one of the expansions, whoever it is, right? Like you can just pick someone because you like that character. And eventually you could be like, all right, well, that wasn't really my play style. Let me go ahead and try this other one.
Right. So yeah, because you can go about it with that route of I like this character, but then realize, okay, this character plays like this. Maybe I don't like this type of play style. And so I'm gonna look for another character that has a different kind of play style, or have that maybe there's that same character, but they have a different play style in this set, for instance. Right. So again, it gets you, because again, each game is different, right? In how their play styles are and how the characters are. So you learn a lot in playing the deck building games. And like for me personally, like I learned a lot playing the DC deck building game, right? Learned a lot about building decks through there, and then the synergies of cards there. Okay, and then took what I learned and then applied it in these other games. a game like Champions, for instance. I think my final thought, my final closing thought would be kind of what I mentioned before, right? Is you're new, you don't know where to go. I'd probably stick you more towards a game like Marvel Legendary if you're just new to card games in general. If you're more experienced, I'd probably say go more towards Champions, unless you're looking for that different kind of experience. So I think you also got to know like what experience you're looking for and then go from there.
Even if you don't have a lot of experience in card games, say you played a little bit of Pokemon, played a little bit of Yu-Gi-Oh, a little bit of Magic, whatever card game it is, but you kind of just don't want to spend a whole lot of money and like rebuilding a deck and buying the new set. It's like, okay, you can have fun with just the base set of Marvel Champions and have a bunch of different decks that you can build.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's not like you have to be an expert in these card games to really enjoy it either. You could just dabble. You played a couple games here and there. You would still probably really like Marvel Champions.
Yeah, and I think regardless, I think if you're on the fence, like check the core sets for both games, right? And then kind of make your determination from there. But at least with this gives you a lot of good information about what each game is and what kind of experience you're going to be getting, whether you go into Marvel Legendary or you go into Marvel Champions. So hopefully this video gave you guys a lot of the information that you're looking for and that you need to make that decision. So if you like this video, be sure to hit that like button. Check down in the description. We do have links to both of these games. We'll leave links to the core sets for both games as well as some of the other expansions for these games if you want to pick those up and help support the channel. So thanks everybody for checking out this video. Again, be sure to hit that like button. Also hit that subscribe button if you want to see more card game content like this in the future. And thanks everybody for being here. We'll check you out in the next video. See you everybody.
Take care.